Do you want to know a funny thing about this?
America runs on Dunkin'. What?
I just collect the cups. I don't drink
Well,
Dunkin'.
that's good because I actually hate Dunkin' Donuts.
Well, Dunkin' coffee is good enough for an airport-run coffee.
No, you're from Boston.
I'm actually from California, but I got
You live in
converted to
Boston.
Dunkin' because you can't really get away from Dunkin'. And at Starbucks, I've already been through this with a million people. Starbucks Pike Place Roast is one of the worst coffees out there, period, end of story. It's
No, I
completely
didn't. I
overrated.
don't think like Starbucks is the best coffee, but I think I would choose Starbucks over Dunkin' any day of the week.
Given the choice between like one of those pods, like Keurig pods, or like Pike Place, I'll take the Keurig pods, even those are marginal at best.
I don't take either.
Should we get started?
Yeah, we can get started.
Welcome back to the Inorganic Podcast. Great to have you back with us again. We've got some big news.
Yes, we do.
Ayelet and I are Facebook official.
Haven't used Facebook in quite a few years, but yes, we are officially co-hosts.
I, for the record, is like one of the first 4,000 users on Facebook, so I can still reference that. It is a bit ex-gen of me to say that term, but
Yes.
Ayelet, I'm really excited to have you as an official co-host of the Inorganic Podcast. I think we make such a great pair. I've got this software background. You have this agency background. You've been doing deals in agency a lot longer than I have. I'm about a year into this market, but there's a lot to learn. And so it's great that we can cover content in software M&A and marketing M&A, agency M&A, if you will. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun on this road. So thank you so much for agreeing to become a part of this journey with me.
I'm so excited. I think that this is going to be a great ride, and we've already had a few great episodes, and so why
Yes,
not just continue it?
we're blowing it up. What are
Yeah.
we going to talk about today?
Pretty sure we're going to go into what we're seeing in the market from a Q2 perspective.
Yeah, M&A activity and agency in Q2. A few of the reports are out. Avala Advisors, our friends at Palazzo, put out a really great report. And I think what we should do is, before we get into the meat of everything, like what are the big themes of the quarter? So like, what are the big themes that we're seeing? We're on the front lines of M&A every day. What are you seeing?
I am seeing that deals are still happening, right? The market is significantly pickier, right? That's what we're seeing. And then the biggest one is that the market's not going to go back to what it was in 2021.
No
So we
way.
need to stop expecting that.
We'll have to talk a little bit about that. We need to double
Yeah.
click on that one. But absolutely, like there is definitely activity happening. Palazzo observed 20 transactions. You and I were talking before the pod, preparing about at least 5 or 6 other transactions we know of that have not been officially announced. So activity is happening. Notably, there's a few notable things about what isn't happening. We'll get into that as well. But maybe like the first thing that we should do is hat tip to our friends at Palazzo. I think they put out probably the most comprehensive report. So we should talk a little bit about kind of overall what we're seeing in terms of deal activity at the very high level. And I think there's a pretty consistent read between Avala's report and Palazzo's report in terms of multiples. So like the multiple is the multiple, generally the multiple on EBITDA, of which the agencies have traded. Palazzo observed about 7.49x, and Avala had it at their Q225 was at 6.1x. How does that compare with sort of what you're seeing in terms? You do a lot of much more deal volume than I do, or at least actually closing them. I observe a lot of deal volume. I'm a little bit pickier as a buyer. So what are you seeing in comparison? 6 to 7x range of multiple trading for marketing agencies.
Yeah, it's not even that like I necessarily do more deals, but it's also like the different size of deals that we do. I definitely see a bit of a broader range than you necessarily deal with when what you're looking for from a buying perspective.
Yeah.
With the deals that were announced on the report that Palazzo announced, it is very clear like the people that are acquiring them. And so I think that's consistent from what we're seeing, though there is a lot more of a range. Can go lower for the smaller deals, and the bigger deals that are just the outliers. they're there, but it's not as common practice. So I would say that's pretty consistent from what we've been seeing right now in that range from the deals that that were announced.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, when people ask, I get asked all the time by founders when I'm talking to them, hey, well, how much will you pay for my company?
What's my
What,
agency
what am
worth?
I worth? Fair question to be asking. And, we always want to get to that as fast as possible, but we need to understand a lot. And we've already talked about what we need to understand in order to get to that in our other episode. But, generally the market is like roughly 5 to 10x. But there are scenarios where, I did one bid this quarter in sort of the sub 5. And there's some deals that I've been seeing where they're getting close to 10x. 10x is really hard to do for reasons we can probably get into a little bit later, but generally 5 to 10 is a fair range. So I think between the two observations of roughly 6 to 7x multiples, I think that's kind of right in the middle of road of what we're seeing. But quality of asset has a lot to do. And in at least one case this quarter, it wasn't even a multiple of EBITDA, it was a multiple of revenue, which says a little bit about some of the trends that are happening in the market. So why don't we switch gears and just talk about the first thing I want to do is maybe just go that we want to highlight 3 specific deals here, but I was observing the 20 some odd deals that were in the Palazzo report, and there was a few that were just kind of notable. One was Acadia's acquisition of Crush in April. That was a retail media acquisition. Crush, great small retail media agency. A lot of these retail media agencies have customers with MRR between 5 and 10,000 a month. It's really hard to acquire those types of customers if you're a larger scaled agency, because generally you don't want to deal with that kind of MRR. There are very few sponsors who want that. I've looked at like 200 retail media agencies, and there's a very, very small amount that are actually able to capture more than 15 to 20,000 a month in MRR. My guess is that Crush was probably one of those smaller ones, and it just fit really nicely. A lot of these agencies have been picked up, so I think this is just a nice add-on, great team, customer add for Acadia is my read of that.
Which is an important thing to note on that we'll like kind of continue to talk about, that the theme for a lot of this has been fit for a lot of these acquisitions. Fit has kind of been that key word for this quarter, I would say.
I think the one kind of notable strategic in the US, PE-backed strategic, Stagwell's acquisition of Jet Fuel, which is a brand agency. You can see a lot of people making investments in upper funnel. And what was the other one that I thought was interesting? Oh, Dot Digital acquiring Social Snowball in June 26, which is an affiliate and referral platform for D2C. So there's an interesting acquisition to note as well. But one thing out of this whole list that's very interesting, in year to date, we haven't seen Tenuity, we haven't seen Power Digital, we haven't seen some of the active buyers. Some of these active buyers were featured at the JEGI conference. They were kind of their acquisition path had been featured. We didn't see them make any buys. I kind of put an asterisk next to PMG. I didn't see them make any acquisitions, except they made a really big announcement in, I think it was late May or early June, about the acquisition of Momentum Commerce. That was, I mean, great PR, but kind of a non-event because PMG already had a pretty significant ownership in Momentum. But excellent work on the PR front, George. Like, please go wow. I bought the rest of the thing I already owned. Let's blow up the press lines on it. You got to give props to their demand generation team for that work. But going into the 3 kind of really interesting deals in the market, we should first talk about BrainLab's acquisition of Xveris Media. What are the kind of the details that we heard on that?
We saw that it was a media play, right? So it added 100 million plus in media spend and also had a strong AI capability to it. So telling us what people are looking for right now. And we are this, I mean, Christian and I were, funny enough, just both out at the same conference together. And there's been a heavy push around a few different capabilities. And one is media, 2 is AI and tech capabilities. And we'll talk about the third too, but there's a big talent play too right now.
Absolutely. I think that media is just going to continue to be an extremely valuable component of any acquisition that is outside of really target capability. So you might be a strategic buyer that's looking for influencer or creator or, like experiential capability. But more generally, if you can look for something that has a media component to it, it's highly valuable. And the reason why is really simple. When you own the media, when you control the media, you have a much tighter grasp on the overall client relationship. The other thing about these media agencies is they're very tech driven, and reporting and analytics and a lot of the AI that's going into that today is becoming increasingly valuable because look, we're with what Google is, with what's happening with AI and search, like paid media can't keep up with the degradation of organic search payback. So what that means is that you have to get better and better at executing paid to keep up with the degradation in organic search. I know there's a whole sub thread on like Google's growing, it's not decreasing, but there's like 9,000 blogs out there talking about how every single brand is having a very difficult time with organic search right now. And they're having to invest a lot in AIO, AI-enabled search optimization, in order to keep up with the degradation in organic as we've known it for the last 20 years. So it makes a lot of sense to be investing in media agency if you're a strategic buyer. The next deal is one that I personally found really interesting because it crosses the software and marketing agency world, is the Publicis acquisition of Captivate. This was announced as a $150 million deal, which is crazy. It was a 5.5x of revenue.
Of
Not
revenue.
EBITDA, revenue.
What does that tell us? Explain what that tells us.
Yeah, so when someone buys something for a multiple of revenue, they're saying this is incredibly strategic to us. When you're at the highest order, when you're making a strategic investment, part of the thesis is revenue synergy, cost synergy, capability capture, people and talent. Like these are kind of the components. When I see a number like that, I just cannot help but run to like cost synergy. They must have a plan to rip a ton of cost out of that business. Now, I did a little back channeling with some people who are kind of closer to the fire. And I understand at the time of acquisition, the revenues of Captivate were about $30 million. So that's like a pretty decent multiple on top of revenue. But the layer to peel back is reportedly like 30% of Captivate was recurring SaaS revenue. So if that's true, that means that 9 to 10 million of that revenue was recurring, and recurring revenue, software revenue, generally has a valuation range between 7 and 10x, depending on the quality and all those other things. This is like 15x SaaS. So you just kind of have to back it out and say, okay, so they valued the tech at, that, we'll just call it 10 million. They valued that at, we'll call it 100 million. And then they gave them another $50 million premium on top for the revenue that they had. It couldn't have possibly been a case where it's profitable enough to pay all that back. So if you look at the roughly 200 people in that business, I think 100 people are going to be looking for work in the next year and a half. The most talented people are going to be sticking around and helping build the kind of the whatever else that Publicis wanted to get out of it. And I think the other thing is, I believe it's going to be merged with Influentia, which sort of capitalizes on my belief that there's probably a big cost synergy play here. They're going to be able to take that recurring, make it a lot, bring up the gross margins, and overall bring up the EBITDA margins of the business and get that payback as fast as possible. A lot of people talk about it also being a creator, a big play on creator, which is absolutely a part of that play. I'm just not sure whether I would be paying 15x for creator anything.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting question then, because a lot of agencies will kind of come to me like long before they go to market and go to sell. And they'll, especially when, AI became like, mass produced and everyone started using GPT and GPT became open to the public. Oh, we have a piece of technology in our agency. Maybe we should go out because SaaS multiples are so high and agencies are kind of low. Should we just go out and make ourselves like a software play? What's your answer when people tell you that?
I had that conversation actually when we were at the conference this week. A repeat founder pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I yeah, I really need some advice about, positioning my business as like tech enabled or tech led. I want to make sure that I maximize the multiple. And so I have this vision and this idea for product. And the best advice I could give them was basically two pieces of advice. First of all, work back from the customer, keep it as simple as possible, which is, oh yeah, duh. But what I meant by that was they had described sort of a capability as like, we can do all these different things for customers. They can use our product in all these different ways. And I gave her the example of Basecamp. I don't even remember Basecamp software from back in the day. People use Basecamp for a wide variety of use cases, but Basecamp as a product was fundamentally very simple. It was like time tracking, collaboration, comments and documents, and some project management tooling that got used in a million different ways. And it was actually one of the first fully remote software companies that was wildly profitable. So I gave them that example of you can have a tech platform that can be used for a multiplicity of use cases, but make sure that ultimately at the end of the day, the product is very simple. And the second thing I said, if you really want to get valued as a software company, from day one, you should be thinking about how am I going to get myself to 75% plus gross margins? Because it's the gross margins that ultimately define the quality of the business, and that if you get that kind of recurring revenue, you're going to see it in the gross margins. An agency has 40 to 45% gross margins, and so you kind of decide from day one how you want to design yourself into like how you want to be valued. Profitability matters all the time, but if you're running 80% gross margins and you're like your EBITDA is low, you can get to like between growth and EBITDA, you can get to like rule of 30 and rule of 40. You could be easily valued as a software company, but it's really all kind of ties back to those pieces. So that was my advice to that founder. And I love that you brought that up because this is a real
So
conversation.
it's pretty common right
Yeah.
now. And I actually like give the advice of you typically don't do it. Don't go and try to make yourself something that you're currently not. If you're tech enabled versus like genuinely have a massive SaaS component, there are very few that are then going to be valued with the SaaS multiple like we saw here too. Like
Yeah.
it's really significantly less than one would think. And you're better off putting your knowledge, if you are an agency person, into the agency and making that as healthy as possible to get the return that you want.
Yeah, totally. I think the last acquisition or acquirer we should talk about while we're talking about Q2 activity is Together Group. What do you know about Together Group? I don't actually know them as well as I should.
Yeah, so I didn't know them either, and I was just doing some background research, but this actually got a lot of PR from PR. Obviously, with the niche, they're framing themselves as the LVMH of luxury agencies. So they acquired numerous within like boutique brand and PR, experiential acquisition, but really focusing on the luxury consumer right now. And that's where they went with that one. And so from a PR and fit standpoint, that's where they're positioning themselves as in the market.
So in May they acquired OBO, and in February they acquired Emerja. So I looked up Emerja. Emerja at the time of acquisition was roughly 40 employees, a provider of virtual reality and real estate services intended to offer quality virtual reality experiences. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like high quality virtual reality for, you can imagine like a high-end luxury condo building in New York City, walk yourself through your penthouse apartment before you actually have to go there and check it out. OBO, creative production agency for content for luxury and entertainment industry. This is actually a really tough category to operate in.
They also own Purple, and Purple is a pretty strong name in the luxury world.
Yeah, yeah, and it again, like if you're, I don't know, Ritz Carlton, Intercontinental Hotels, Sofitel, it's, you have a different kind of a buyer, a different type of a client. And when you're going out to RFP, you want to find an agency who really understands how to connect with your market, how to capture them, how to bring them into the funnel and ultimately convert them and get them to buy or subscribe or become buy a condo in your luxury apartment building. There is a specialization to servicing that market. So I think it's really smart to focus there. I don't know how big the TAM is, but if they're willing to pay the price for that specialization, you can build a pretty decent business. It looks like Together Group today is about 527 employees. So by that measure, probably 125 to $150 million agency is my guess, roughly.
says since 2017 they've done about 14 acquisitions.
Yeah, highly
Yeah.
acquisitive, and largely small acquisitions as well, just little pieces here and there. So, very, and also I would say they're, it's clear they're global. They've done acquisitions in China, they've done acquisitions in London. So
The
they're all
luxury market is very much a global market that you're trying
totally,
to take a hold of.
totally. Yeah. So I think those are like three good examples of acquisitions that have happened in the quarter that are really interesting, kind of eye-opening acquisitions. What do they tell us?
I think they're telling us kind of what I hinted at earlier, that it's really going to be around what do you want, like from a buyer perspective, like who are we trying to become, and then how do we get that, and being very picky, right? Running these specific processes, not running this massive broad process that we've been seeing from like a seller perspective across the board, especially because the buyers, I mean, even this is what you're doing, like you're very clear on what you're after right now, and you guys are all going to find those targets. And so the deals that are coming in this range are all about fit and buy box right now. We're
Yeah.
not going this massive aggregator move like we were seeing a few years ago. Let's just gobble up EBITDA to gobble up EBITDA. It's really specified to be in this like thesis of what we want from a buying perspective.
And I think historically, what we call in M&A call it buying calories, which is just sort of buying revenue, buying customers, buying EBITDA. It's a play. The high level thinking is like, okay, I'll buy five and one or two will work out. We're in a market where you don't really want to do that. You sort of want to buy one and you want a percentage of it to work out really well. So I'd say as a buyer and generally an observer of buyers right now, we're being a little bit pickier. We really want client fitment, capability fitment, and culture fitment. It's very hard to find those three things in one. So the deal flow is really good in the market. It's the fitment with that. One of my favorite companies that I looked at this quarter, which I can't name here because it's still in market, but it's like a tech enabled platform that worked around performance creative. Really cool founder, really smart, just on the front lines of the culture was there, but I couldn't figure out how to fit it
Oh,
onto the ship. The client sizes weren't right, the revenue sizes weren't right, and it's really hard. If you skip a step, you take on some risk. I think as a buyer, you're always willing to take on a little risk for value, but this wasn't kind of a value deal. It was sort of like we want a really good exit, and so you have to pass up on things, and it's very tough. And when you're in my seat and you see all this deal activity, you're always like, you have a brief moment of like self-auditing panic, like what have I done wrong? You go back and look at every single deal that you passed on or that you didn't win for whatever reason and say, did I not do something right? But the hardest thing about this work is following the process. And what that means for founders who are engaging with strategic is appreciate that process and actually make yourself a part of the process on the other side. Find that culture fitment, find that commercial alignment, make sure that where you're going, you believe that you can accrete the value that's going to come along with your adding on to that rocket ship. It's going to make your experience and also the payback when you roll much more exciting.
yeah. I think that there's often two sides to what happens when you go through a process too, right? You're having those culture fit convos and like understanding the marketing side of things and all of that. And oftentimes those are like really feel good conversations too, where you're like, wow, this could really fit if you're the seller. And then there's this other side that's like the business side conversation that you're going to be having with that head of corp dev, CFO, CEO. And it's people often think about like, okay, well, which should I focus on most, right? You really need to have both components in there for it to work at the end of the day. But
Yeah.
like if a founder's preparing to sell over, the next 6 to 12 months, understanding what the buyers are looking for, and in really figuring out who is going to kind of be that person, or that who's going to be the home that would be a fit from all perspectives within the deal.
Can we talk about multiple expectations engineering as a subtopic here?
Go for it.
Well, I'd love to hear what you see. Like we both talk to a lot of the same sellers, and they're always like, should I sell now? Can I get the number that I want? Should I wait? I'm going to wait.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait.
there's an expectation that 2022 is coming back.
It's not. Like, I don't know how many times we need to have these conversations.
A lot.
Right. It's just not going to happen. That was the anomaly. That's not the rule. Right. And you need to go back to the expectation of what's been constant over the market and what we're seeing. And also the timing, like understand the timing. This was something that actually Bob Glazer talked about at the M&A briefing at Affiliate Summit, which we were both at,
Yeah.
was around the, like, you also need to time your exit not into the right platform, right? That has a big effect on the next bite of the apple is where are you coming in this PE fit, in the stage that this is at right now. And so it's not just important to think about the market and you're not going to return to 22, but maybe get closer, but think about the platforms that you're coming into and what's the timing from that perspective.
If you're a founder right now, the thing you should know is that again, the market's kind of spoken. Whether you believe Palazzo, whether you believe other observers of the market, the multiples are right around 7. And if you've got something better than 7 in your hand right now, you're doing pretty well. You're above average. The second thing is that large scaled agencies that have large EBITDA profiles, just by sheer tailwinds, have the ability to trade at higher multiples. And when a large agency with a larger multiple is able to buy yours for a lower multiple, that is called arbitrage. And you as a seller want that, especially if you're going to roll. It means you get to participate in the next bite that will come down the line. And you don't want to put strategics into a position where they're not able to arbitrage a little bit, because if they can't, then it just makes things harder when they trade later, eventually between PE buyers, they go public or whatever that outcome is. So it's actually works out in your favor to leave a little bit on the table. There's always going to be like the Mars United Commerce that trades for like 16x because of the tech and all the stuff that they have in the platform. These are unique deals happen. Those deals happen when you have significantly scaled EBITDA. That's how those are possible.
Always.
Technology plus EBITDA really puts those things together. So also as a seller, becoming a part of a platform that has technology as a centerpiece of its story is very exciting to strategic buyers, very interesting to strategic buyers. And the two buyers that I haven't seen in here that I know are on the sidelines and are waiting, we've heard Accenture say they want to be acquisitive. They're looking to get more into digital marketing services. I also haven't seen Deloitte Digital, and Deloitte Digital is sitting there on a pile of cash, just looking for interesting things to pick up. So I'm looking at those.
They're going to deploy, right?
Yeah.
They're waiting for the right time. And also we know because we saw it, we see it all the time. We're all talking to the same people, is like Q2 is an interesting time, right? We were seeing in Q1, right, where tariffs are coming in. There was this like big fear that was coming into the market. And then Q2 started to pick back up again and people are shopping and there's a lot of active processes going on. And so I think that we are going to see, and we can talk about this, right? What we're going to see into the Q3, Q4 right now, because we know that, public markets and macro is very much shaping how we're all behaving.
I think just as a wrap, maybe we can talk about what we're going to see in Q3. We're already in Q3 right now. It's like we're in the middle of Q3. But it's the summertime, so it's a little, people are kind of slow rolling things. There's vacations and holidays and things like that. I think as we get right past Labor Day, I'm going to expect a lot more a banker deal flow. I've been hearing about a lot of pent up demand for things coming into market right after Labor Day. A lot of firms are warehousing. Warehousing means you are basically sitting on a deal and waiting to bring it out to market. Sometimes you're waiting because of market timing, and sometimes you're waiting because like one more quarter of EBITDA or growth improvement just tells a slightly better story to potential strategic buyers. So I'm very interested in seeing what happens as we turn the corner on September after Labor Day in terms of activity. But I don't know if you have any observations you're thinking about or trends you're thinking about as you look into the latter part of Q3.
We're always going to see a little bit more of an uptick in the fall from a deal perspective, but I actually think this year Q4 might be a little bit busier than what we would have thought Q3 would be, because I also think that there was a really big effect on what happened like with the administration and tariffs on budgets, right? Especially in the agency world. And so I think that people are, and probably a lot even into Q1, except for the really good ones that are having a great year and they're going to go to market in Q4. But there is going to be a little bit of a hold because they want to grow that revenue and EBITDA that they might have not had the best quarter in for, Q1, the latter half of Q1 and early part of Q2. So I actually think that there's going to be an even bigger jump. But what we're seeing from a larger market perspective, especially with the tariffs, is that there is a heavy interest in the digital world, whether that be technology, SaaS, AI, right? Marketing services. It's not going away. It's only continuing to grow. And we're only seeing that in an uncertain market, this is still stable. Right. This is still normalized.
Yeah. I'm going to the Canaccord conference this week. So I think our next episode, we should talk about the trends that are kind of shaping M&A. And I think I'll be able to kind of capitalize on some of those insights after hobnobbing with our friends at Canaccord and a lot of the sellers who are thinking about coming to market, contemplating coming to market, contemplating doing more strategic things. I think it'll be interesting to kind of pair out those insights for our next episode. How does that sound to you?
Sounds pretty great.
Cool.
I know we have a few really good episodes planned.
We've got some great episodes.
I know. I'm like so excited to talk about some of them and see who we're going to have on for a few, see the guests that we're having on. So definitely come back for more.
Well, Ayelet, I'm glad that at least 4 times on this podcast, I've correctly pronounced your name.
There you go. You got it right every single time. This one. You got it right.
Well, look, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please like, subscribe, share wherever you listen. We're so grateful to have you. And thank you again to Ayelet for joining me on this journey with the Inorganic. We'll see you on the next episode of the Inorganic Podcast. Take care.